and welcome back to No Limit Drag Racing 2.0. Now, we're jumping back into the brand new imports update this time because, honestly, this is the fastest car from the update that I've driven so far, and a lot of y'all are probably going to be very disappointed to find out that it's a Honda Civic. And I honestly don't know where these comments kind of come from, but I didn't realize that there were people out there that were legitimately mad about this update, because in the last video that I did about the update, there were people that are all angry and upset in the comments that there's even imports in this game now. And I'm like, what did you think this game was? Like a muscle cars only drag racing game? Like, if you've ever been around any kind of drag strip really in the real world, honestly, you would know that there's a bunch of different cars from a bunch of different categories there anyway. So getting mad that they're in the game doesn't really help anyone. But at the same time, I don't know, if you're going to freak out about a certain type of car being in a game that you think shouldn't be in the game, I'm like, that just gives off massive, like, my opinion is the only one that matters energy. And it's one of those things where I'm like, if you don't like the imports, just don't use the imports. As far as for me and everyone else that seems to be having honestly a delightful time with the imports, I don't know. I think we're going to just keep on using them, especially if it makes you so upset. However, with all of that out of the way, what I really wanted to talk about in this video is how, if this car is sort of the introduction to the potential that front wheel drive actually has in this game is, or rather what it's like, I honestly think that front wheel drive drag cars could have a huge future in No Limit, because there is so much, honestly, there's so much going on here that honestly does a really good job of hustling this thing down the track, that I think you could have, honestly, sky's the limit kind of thing when it comes to the front wheel drive cars now. Another thing that I do want to go over before we go any farther is the tune. I will not be showing the full tune. If you want to see the tune, I will leave a link to the original tune in the description box down below. So make sure you go ahead and support the original tuner that came up with the setup that I based this car off of. And later on down the road, I may mess with and tweak this setup a little bit. But if you want to have a setup that absolutely shreds right out of the box, again, make sure you go ahead and support the original creator of this tune, whose video will be linked in the description box down below. And now we finally get to go ahead and drive this thing. So one of the biggest things that I need to kind of highlight before we go any further is the fact that there's a big asterisk on whether or not you're going to hit that advertised 560. So here's the thing with hitting a 560 with this car. You have to, and I mean have to, nail the 1-2 shift perfectly, because if you don't, you will not hit the 560, not even close. So do keep that in mind. And I did hit it a couple of times across the course of this video, but that's the biggest thing you have to keep in mind, is that if you do not nail that 1-2 shift, the 560 is just not going to happen. And of course, with practice, you'll absolutely get there with your 1-2 shift. It's just going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of just running the car over and over and over and over again. And obviously you can practice that in test and tune. You can practice that in low cost online races, or like maybe restricting the online races you enter to just $100 instead of going for some of the really expensive races where you have to put up a lot of in-game cash. So just keep that in mind when you are actually ripping in this car. And we did hit a 560. It was an upper 560, but we still hit one. And honestly, it's super satisfying every time you do. And remember, the more of these you do, the more you'll just be able to hit and hit and hit over and over and over again. Now, this race, or rather this upcoming string of races, was, I'm going to be honest, entirely an accident. I thought this was a quarter-mile race. It was a lot shorter than that. And I jumped into this one by mistake, and then I kind of realized that even though I wasn't necessarily winning these races, I was actually able to get a little closer to winning one of them or two of them than I thought I was going to be. So this car can apparently be halfway decent at stuff that's even shorter than a quarter mile. And also keep in mind, this was no prep whatsoever. So, I mean, I expected it to just spin entirely, but again, kind of blown away by the fact that this also worked. And while, of course, I need to kind of asterisk there with my definition of worked because we didn't win these, but as you'll see in some of them, we did get really, really close. So I'm still going to call that a halfway win because it still surprised me. And then this next one was probably the closest one we had out of the entire set of races against this R34. So this one, honestly, this one shocked even me. And really, everything was going fairly okay until I jumped into another lobby and then I saw, well, a Datsun Z missing half of its body panels. And I was like, yep, I'm about to get entirely obliterated. And you know what? That's just gonna be how it's gonna be. But honestly, I would love to hear from y'all in the comments down below as to what your experiences have been like with not only this Honda Civic, but obviously with the rest of the update in general. Now, it comes down to how many of my other videos you've seen, because if you've shared some of your feelings and opinions on the update on some of my other videos, you don't necessarily, I'm not going to tell you that you have to leave them on this one as well if you've already left the same feelings elsewhere. I'm not going to be like, now you tell me exactly how you feel about this update in the comments right now. See, I can't even be assertive. But honestly, at the end of the day, I've just been having a really good time with the whole update, and not just the whole update, but this car in particular has surprised me, honestly, more than I can even describe, because it's become sort of a unknown gem, at least for me, because I never really expected to, I didn't expect to enjoy this thing. I'm not necessarily usually all that big of a fan of front-wheel drive cars. So when I found out that this thing was as fast as it was, I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll go ahead and put in a little bit more practice and a little bit more time, and I'll dive into some tuning advice for it. And it honestly ended up paying off considerably. So if you're someone that isn't really a fan of front-wheel drive cars to begin with, I still recommend giving this car and potentially even this tune a little bit of a go. And who knows, you might enjoy it enough to keep it around in your garage for a while. I know it's definitely going to be a mainstay for a good bit in mine. And like I said before, it really did turn out to be the most unexpected car of the entire update for me, because it was the car I expected to want to drive the least. And it's always such an odd turnaround whenever the car that you expect to drive the least turns out to be one of your personal favorites. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave y'all with a couple more races. I hope you enjoy them. And remember, if you do decide to build one of these off of the basis of the same tune that I used, just make sure to practice nailing that 1-2 shift. And I promise you'll have wonderful results. But that's going to do it for this one, and I will see y'all next time.